Our story today is God's promises, new names, and a birthday. You will need the covenant box and either a desert box or brown felt on which to tell the story. One of the covenant boxes that we have looks like this inside. It's a little bigger box, but they both have the same elements. They have the vials of sand and stars and dust of the earth, forever home, and new names, and the gold box that has baby Isaac in it. Our story today comes from God's true book, the Bible, and we've been in the book of Genesis learning so much about what has happened since the beginning of time, the creation, the beginning of sin, the destruction of the world with the flood and Noah, and Abram and Sarah. We're going to continue our story with Abram and Sarah, and it is in a few chapters in Genesis. So you can start with Genesis 12, but you'll also need to read a few more chapters after that. So I would just say start reading with your mom and dad, and you'll know where this part of the story ends. This is a story about our Abram and Sarai, and we've watched them leave the land of Haran, which was their home, and travel to a far-off place, the promised land that God was giving them. God had promised Abram that he would be the father of many nations, that he would bless the world, that kings would come from him. Still, Abram and Sarai had no children. Abram was puzzled about this, and he talked to God about it, and this is what God said. He said, Abram, count the dust of the earth. Abram could not count it. That is how many children you will have. He said, Abram, count the stars of the sky. Look to the heavens. That is how many children you will have. Abram could not count them. There were so many. And later God said to Abram, look at the sand in the sea. Can you count the grains of sand in the sea? There were too many. Abram could not count them. And God said to Abram, that's how many children you will have. What beautiful promises. Beautiful promises. And Abram knew they were true. But time went on. And he and Sarai were getting older and older. And still they had no child. One day God came and met with Abram, and he said, I am El Shaddai. I am God Almighty. There's nothing that I cannot do. El Shaddai was his name in Hebrew. It's his name in the Hebrew Bible. And it was the first time he had used this name. And he said, Abram, my name is God Almighty. And then he said to Abram, I am going to give you a new name. No longer will you be called Abram, which means high father, like the big father, powerful father. Now I will call you Abraham, which means father of many, 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 many people. And then he said to Abram, kings will come from you, nations will come from you. And then he reminded Abram of his promise that I am giving you a forever home. I am giving you the promised land. They were in the promised land right now, but it wasn't theirs yet. And then he said, and I'm going to change Sarai's name too. Sarai meant my princess. And he changed her name to Sarah, which meant mother of nations. Then God reminded him that he and Sarah would have a baby. And you know what? Abram forgot the name he had learned about God Almighty. He forgot that God's name was so powerful. He forgot that God Almighty can do amazing things, even if they are small things like a baby, or big things in the whole world. God can do anything. And Abram laughed because he forgot. A year went by. God again visited Abraham and Sarah, and he said, "In a year, you will have a baby." And God was pretty much telling this to Abraham, but Sarah was in the tent, and she heard it, and she laughed inside, not out loud, but inside. And God said to Abraham, "Why did your wife laugh?" And she peeked out of the tent. She goes, "I didn't laugh." And God said, "But you did, because God knows everything." Well, a year went by, and the very special gift, the gift that Abram and Sarah had been waiting for all of their lives, the gift that was going to begin to have Abraham and Sarah have children as many as the dust of the earth, the stars of the sky, and the sand of the sea, had come. The gift had come, and they named him Isaac, like God had told them to. And you know what Isaac means? It means laughter. And I can't imagine how much laughter Abraham and Sarah had as old people holding in their arms this newborn precious son that they had waited for so many years. I wonder how hard it was for them to wait. I wonder if it was hard for them to believe that God really was going to multiply their children to be as many as the dust of the earth and the stars of the sky and the sand of the sea. I wonder what it felt like to have your name changed when you were old. I wonder